This is CNC World, a new perspective.
On the same day, the Seacity Museum in Southampton officially opened to public, offering plenty you want to know about the Titanic and its stories. Lifestyles takes you on a tour around the museum.
Perhaps nowhere else could feel such deep sorrow as Southampton, hometown to 714 of the 897 crew members on Titanic. And among the 685 lost ones, 538 were from Southampton.
The museum is about Southampton's maritime history, and the reason why it opens today is that today is 100 years ago that the Titanic sailed from Southampton. So obviously we're standing in the Southampton's Titanic Story Gallery, and it tells the story of the crew, because most of the crew came from Southampton, and it's a story that's not been told in very many other places.
The museum is mainly divided into three parts: Southampton's Titanic story, Titanic the legend, and Gateway to the World. In one of the display rooms, the floor featured a huge map showing the city in 1912, with red dots representing the 500-plus families deprived of their kins. The visual impact gives people a sad review of how much Southampton had suffered from the disaster. At the entrance to another room, there was a wall full of crew members' photos.
The wall shows a little card for every crew member on board, and all the orange ones gave a Southampton address when they signed on. So you can see most of them are orange. It doesn't necessarily mean to say that their families lived in Southampton. Some of them stayed in hotels and lodgings, but most of them were Southampton people.
On display are also belongings from the victims or survivors. They give people a closer feeling about the long-ago disaster.
In Smith's sword, Captain Smith was the captain of the Titanic, and his sword, this sword didn't actually go on the Titanic, it was presented to his wife, and after a while she presented it back to the city of Southampton. And finally, we also have Sid Sejuniry's pocket watch. Sid Sejunery was a member of the crew, an officer, and his pocket watch was unfortunately found on his body, but the pocket watch stopped at exactly the time his body hit the water, and really is a very fitting tribute and an emotional exhibit in many ways, telling the story of the crew.
The 500 tickets on the first day have been sold out quickly. Most of the first visitors have special connections with Titanic.
My grandfather, obviously there's an interest from the family, and so we thought it would be good to come and have a look and see just how well they had done the exhibition. Very proud of my grandfather because he survived and he was in charge of one of the lifeboats, so he saved 68 people.
After a century, Titanic is still a much-discussed topic to not only Southampton but the entire world. There are many different explanations about the sinking, like flaw of the design, and even the rivets were blamed for the sinking. There was also hearsay that Titanic was speeding at the time it bumped into the iceberg. Balmoral, the memorial cruise which left Southampton on April the 8th to resail Titanic routes, had to start 2 days before the departure date of the Titanic so as to reach his wreck site on Saturday. Titanic has also left legacies. According to Maria, the curator, one of them was maritime safety. Before the accident, the number of lifeboats on board was related to the size of the ship, but afterwards it was determined by the number of passengers. More lifeboats were put onto the ships. As of today, they also introduced a rule that every ship should have a 24-hour radio operation system. At the time of Titanic, the ship nearest to the wreck site only had one radio operator. He was fast asleep and failed to receive the messages for help. Although 100 years have passed, the stories of Titanic are not forgotten by the world.
Lots of cities and countries can lay claim to part of the Titanic story, but over 500, in fact 540 people of the crew died, from Southampton died, and that's had a huge impact on the city. When the city had only 100,000 residents at the time, there was such a massive impact on the demographic. There were over 300 widows created as a result of the Titanic, and so we still feel that connection today, partly as a port city where people are still going on journeys around the world across the sea, but also because many descendants still live in the city.
Because of the awe for life, the pain of loss, and perhaps of much else, the tragedy of Titanic is and will be remembered in people's heart.
This is CNC World, a new perspective.